So I debated on what I wanted this month's video to be. I already had some art that I was working on for a Pokemon Day video that just never got made, and I figured I'd do that. But it was just kind of redrawing some older art, and while I'll probably finish them, it wasn't that interesting, I guess. If those do all get finished, I'll post them on Instagram, but I don't think they're interesting enough to make a whole video about. So instead, I pivoted to my second idea, one based on a few fakemon designs that I'd started a little over a year ago for a mildly personal reason. I'll preface this by saying I'm rarely one to draw any sort of vent art. It's not that I don't want to or don't feel the need to, but I just can't really find a way to translate the tangled mess of thoughts and emotions going on in my head into cohesive artwork. I've tried in the past, as either illustrations or, in one case, a short animation for a class in college, but even though the ideas made sense in my head, once I got them down on paper, it was a disaster. Couldn't convey a lick of what was going on in my mind. So needless to say, I don't really draw anything that has a huge level of emotional depth. Even my own personal characters lacked a lot of depth and thought. To get real meta and kind of break character for a minute, my own Fursona, Sombra, this dog avatar PNG that I'm speaking through, she never had a real personality ever. I'd always say that she's just me, but as a dog, and that was always because I didn't really know who me was. So Sombra just became a generic happy dog furry, but packaged in a design that I visually liked. I want to say that I'm not envious of artists who can translate their emotions and thoughts and experiences into beautiful artwork, but that would be a lie. A part of me wishes I could translate my feelings into illustrations, and I can always try, if the urge hits, but what I can still do in the meantime is design characters. And what is creating fakemon if not an exercise in character design, albeit with some small limitations? The idea came to me because of one of those sorta Tumblr-y, Facebook-y posts. You know the ones, where you share a list of characters from some kind of fandom and ask your friends which character they think you are. Only the one I shared was a list of Pokemon typings. Cause, I'll admit, I'm always curious about that kind of stuff. I wonder how I'm perceived by my friends. And I didn't get back a lot of responses on it, only 2. But the 2 friends that did respond said that I would be an ice fairy type, cause of elegance or something like that anyways. It's been a while and I'm not gonna dig the post up again, but to me, that type combo didn't resonate. Don't get me wrong, despite the double steel weakness, I do like that type combo. Alolan Ninetales is a gorgeous Pokemon, but it didn't feel like it fit me. If I'm looking at myself in the mirror, elegance is probably the last word that comes to mind. So then, what Pokemon type do I think I'd be? Not only that, but what sort of Pokemon do I think I would be? Not out of the ones that exist, but if I could, I guess, condense myself into one singular Pokemon design, what would that design be? What would it look like? What would its type be? Its moves, ability, all of that stuff. And I figure I couldn't condense that into one design. I don't think I wanted to. It occurred to me that I could create something that encompassed what I felt about myself, but I could also create something that encompassed how I wanted to feel about myself. Varying ways I either wanted to be seen or ways I wanted to express myself but just haven't. So I definitely would need more than one design for that, but everything needs a starting point. And after sketching shapes and poses, I eventually came up with my starting point. This is Pandant, a normal ice type. Cute little thing, isn't she? Her name is pretty self-explanatory, I think. Puppy and despondent, and well, that's her character. A small, timid puppy who's probably afraid of her own shadow. Everything about her is fairly symbolic from the type of animal she is. I mean, making her a dog was literally the only option. Making her specifically a vague husky or malamute looking dog was also the only option, but everything else is pretty symbolic too. Normal ice type? That gives her a double weakness to fighting. I'm told that I'm a stubborn person, and this is a true statement, but stubbornness doesn't equate to being a fighter. and I'm quite prone to giving up when the going gets tough, which I'm aware is not a very good thing, but as with most things in life, it is what it is. It's certainly something I can work to fix about myself, but it's not an instantaneous fix, and for the time being, it worked out well for some type inspiration. Along those same veins, her ability? Runaway. Pretty self-explanatory. I want her to be able to get out of a rough situation whenever she wants to because fighting isn't her thing. Though her hidden ability can be Snow Cloak to help raise her evasiveness in the snow. As for attacks, they're all centered around escape. Anything to get her out of a situation or raise her evasiveness or hide her in some capacity. U-turn, minimize, protect, baton pass. Those are a good start. Things like Mist or Aurora Veil, while they don't literally help in hiding a Pokemon, the symbolism of being shrouded by mist or cloaked in a veil is what I'm going for. So where do we go from here? Obviously Pandant evolves. But into what? Well, that depends. She is based on me after all. How do I see myself? What sort of person could I see myself becoming for better or worse? What sort of person would I like to be? What sort of person could I realistically become? I know I'm like 35, but like that doesn't mean I stopped growing or changing as a person. Unsurprisingly, the easiest one to design and sort of just completely come up with an idea for was Melancholy. Unfortunately, I didn't record myself drawing her at all, but that'll change for the next 2 designs. Melancholy's name came to me first, and this sort of set the precedent for how I wanted to name these fakemon. It's a portmanteau of Malamute and or Malevolent, take your pick, Unhappy, and Collie, and altogether it sounds like Melancholy. It was at this point I decided that I wanted each of these Pokemon to have some kind of emotion or feeling as the basis for their name. And Melancholy is just depressed. That's it. It's obviously a terrible thought that I could just give up and give into depression at any time, but like, that's a realistic option, isn't it? It's not one people like to consider for obvious reasons, but it is something that can happen to people for various reasons. So this evolution of Pandant couldn't find happiness, and in being unable to do so, evolved to never be able to experience happiness ever again. The teardrop markings from Pandant fully transform into frozen tears from Melancholy's continuous crying. The ice on her paws are from constantly wiping her tears to the point that they've just formed a layer of ice on her hands. And it was in designing Melancholy that I figured out the thing that will tie all these designs together to make it feel like a cohesive evolutionary line. I realized that Pandant's fur and collar kinda look like a child's winter coat, so what if each evolution kept a sort of wintry coat aesthetic? And so I gave Melancholy the equivalent of a ratty old fur coat with a dusty worn scarf. Her pelt is dark and dirty, and her fur matted and rough. It looks like she hasn't taken much care of herself. Once again, her typing gives her a double weakness to fighting, though she loses the normal primary type for the dark type. Though this time she has more offensive moves, the most notable being Sheer Cold. I wanted to, and I think I succeeded in putting my type of depression on display. To some extent anyways. What I didn't really show is that outside of crying and nothing really making her happy anymore, she also tends to be highly temperamental and lash out in anger and frustration. That's certainly one of the worst symptoms of depression for me at least, because then you feel guilty for how you've behaved, which makes you want to isolate more because you don't believe you should be around people, which makes you more sad because you want human contact. It's a vicious cycle that's difficult to break is what I'm getting at. I mean, that's why I gave her Sheer Cold as a move after all. Symbolically for me, it feels like and sounds like a one-way ticket to pure destruction, if the move can land anyways. Maybe I'll word this wrong, but for me it's the symbolism of lashing out, acting cold and hurtful, and occasionally the hurt will land and somebody will get hurt and leave you, but a lot of the times it misses and the people who care about you will stick around. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone but me, but that's how it is anyways. And I think that's why Melancholy ended up being so easy to design. Like, she embodies the things I feel all too often. The lack of care towards myself and my appearance, the constant desire to stay isolated, crying almost all the time, and the loss of interest in things that once made me happy. All those things suck, but they did open the door to creating a design that I kinda like. But what if we swung the pendulum in the complete opposite direction? What if Pandant found confidence in herself? Well then, we'd have Mersky, the fairy ice type. Her name is just Mary and Husky. That's it. And Mersky, she gave me some issues. I knew some of the things I wanted her design to have. I wanted her to have a sort of cutesy magical girl feel. She needed to be bubbly and happy and feminine, all traits I don't associate with myself, but ones that I wish I could be sometimes. So I looked up generic magical girl poses, and while the first one wasn't terrible, it was horribly static and didn't have the energy that I wanted this Pokemon to have. So I went back to the drawing board. Realistically, not much changed between the first and second passes. Well, technically this was the third pass. The second pass was barely any different than the first one. Just fixing some colors and a few anatomical issues I had, but I still didn't really like it. Her tail was too long for starters, and like I said before, she just wasn't as energetic as I would have wanted her to be. All of the basic concepts stayed the same. She still has a cutesy Lolita-style winter coat and big fluffy paws and floppy ears. Her eyes are styled after Brionne's very overtly magical girl-like eyes, and her face is shorter and has more of a human-like quality to it. The major things I changed were removing the little ice diamond on her chest and shortening her tail. And for once, we're straying away from the symbolism of being double weak to fighting and giving her a mild resistance to it. Sure, she's not immune, but the fairy typing gives her the ability to fight back in a literal sense, since she'd have access to moves that are super effective against fighters. Mersky's purpose is to be an extreme version of the person I'd like to be. Cute and feminine and strong and determined. A magical girl is the perfect representation of that. Strong, powerful women who will fight crime while wearing adorable skirts and high heels. But I also say she's an extreme because that's not who I want to be all the time, or even most of the time. I don't want to dress stereotypically feminine all the time. I don't want to be a take charge person all of the time. Most of the time, I really do just like my jeans and t-shirt, and even when I think of dressing formally, I prefer to wear a suit, even though I'm also too much of a coward to experiment with my clothes in that way too. And while I'm stubborn and like doing things my way, I also like just kind of following along and not making decisions. To be honest, each of these evolutions are extremes in one way or another, and Pandant's last evo isn't any different. Also, she was the hardest to design by a mile. Like, I didn't really have much of an idea to go off of at all. One thing I didn't mention yet is that for the most part, each of these fakemon are also based on 3 personal characters of mine. Pandant and Melancholy are both my main Fursona and mascot Sombra, to some degree anyways. Mersky's my girly girl Dottie, whose reference sheet I never finished, and Canire, the name being canine plus ire. The last evolution is based off of a character I've been meaning to revamp for ages. She's always been Sombra's counterpart in some sense, to the point where her name is basically the same, Penumbra, just one more word for shadow. And I think because I haven't drawn her in years, I just didn't really have anything to work with for this fakemon, just a vague idea for her personality. She's brash, stubborn, self-assured. She knows what she wants and will go after it, no matter what it takes and no matter the cost. What's hers will be hers. This was the hardest concept to nail down for me. Just like with Mersky, I knew she had to have some kind of action pose, but here's the thing. I'm honestly not that great with drawing action poses. You can kind of see in the corner there where I made a static pose first to sort of work out her basic anatomy. Just as I feel like Penumbra is a counterpart to Sombra, Canire is a counterpart in a sense to Melancholy. I wanted them to have similar attributes, mainly the ice-covered paws and dark colors and long fur on the body, but that's where the similarities end. Canire really was the toughest to design, and even after thinking I nailed the pose, I still wanted to go back and fix things because I knew the anatomy was bad. You know how you look at something you've made and just there's something off and you know it's wrong, but you don't completely know how to fix it? It was that, but with the whole lower half of her body. Foreshortening is something I struggle with because I just don't use it a lot, so I just kept playing with it until I made something that was close enough to what I wanted. I didn't mention her type yet, but she's the only one fully immune to fighting, being a ghost ice type. I wanted her to look kind of menacing, and the skull face marking just kind of fell into place. It wasn't what I originally was gonna use, but I ended up sketching it and loving it, and just kept playing with the shapes and everything until the face looked right. I even thought about just ditching this version for a minute because she was looking too much like a cat for a bit, but I just kind of forced myself to keep going on this one because most of the pose looked nice and I really liked the face. I just needed to, you know, make it a dog face. It's why I eventually gave her floppy ears. I wanted her to have cropped Doberman-like ears, but it wasn't working. Plus now she matches with the rest of the evolutions. Just give her a little notch in the ear and voila. Not as cute, maybe. I feel like one day I'll probably take this one back to the drawing board just like I did for Mersky, but for now she's not too bad. She still embodies the sort of wild, violent nature I wanted her to have, a creature that's always ready to fight and takes no prisoners. I know there's no dex entries or anything for these guys. Maybe I'll make some in the future. I sort of still want to develop them further. The entire purpose for these designs were as a sort of way to, I guess, psychoanalyze myself. Maybe not psychoanalyze, but like kind of figure out who I think I am and who I potentially would like to be. And yeah, each of these designs are full extremes, so realistically the answer is none of these. Realistically the answer is somewhere in the middle, and maybe when I figure out who that person is, then I'll make that design. Or maybe not. We'll see. Honestly, I'd love to see other people create Pokemon either based off of themselves or the sort of person they'd like to be and just sort of run wild with it and be more symbolic with the designs and the reasons behind it. I didn't think at all about how these sort of Pokemon would fit into a region or fit in with the game mechanics or anything like that. I just wanted these designs to be symbolic of me. Anyways, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and if you like my art, consider subscribing to keep up with and be notified of future videos. Currently my goal is 1 video a month, and hopefully once I get more comfortable with editing, I can do it quicker and create more. But realistically, 1 a month. And check out my other socials to keep up with my art in general, especially Instagram and Blue Sky, and if you want to support me in some other ways, I also have a Ko-fi. But yeah, that's about it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next month with, hopefully, the follow-up to my Catnap and Dog Day Fakemon.